All right, and we do. And now I'm going to kick it over to the judges. So,
all right, thank you, Dr. Cosgrove. Good afternoon, welcome. I'm Karen Milton from New York, and I am the Chief of Staff right now to the Inspector General for the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. And that's the New York State agency that oversees the New York City buses, subways, bridges, and tunnels, and the commuter rails for the greater New York metropolitan area. Prior to this job, I worked in the federal judiciary, where we actually spent a lot of time talking about habeas corpus and reviewing habeas corpus petitions. As the circuit executive to the Second Circuit. And the circuit executive is sort of the chief operating officer for the federal courts in the states of the circuit. In my case, it was New York, Vermont, and Connecticut. We're really thrilled to be here with you today, and we look forward to a great conversation. I'm going to ask my colleagues to introduce themselves, and then we're going to turn it back to you. We're going to ask you to introduce each of yourselves to us, and also introduce your teachers and coaches and whoever any other member of your support team. So thanks a lot. And Charlie, back to you.
All right, welcome. My name is Charlie Hinderleiter. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for St. Louis Realtors in St. Louis, Missouri. I've taught political science at Western Illinois University, Jefferson College, and Maryville University. And many moons ago, I was a student in the We the People program on that side of the proverbial table. And I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
My name is Mark Simons. I'm a practicing attorney in the state of Nevada. And as I try to tell people, you can get paid a lot of money to do exactly what you're doing, which is talking and presenting an argument and advocating. I love it. Welcome to day 2. I'm excited to hear what you have to say. Don't disappoint us. Give us everything you got, but have fun. Okay? Good luck.
Good afternoon, judges. We are the Unit 1 representatives from Wauwatosa East High School. We are representing the Wisconsin wildcard team. We are coached by Mr. Taylor McDaniel. My name is Abigail Luffel, and I'm joined today by my colleagues Mirga Jria, Nadia Ewell, Kidron Staples, and Owen Gendrick.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. So, Unit 1, question 2. We're ready if you're ready, okay? Let me read the question. Parliament passed the Habeas Corpus Act of 1679. What is habeas corpus, and to what extent, if any, is it essential to the principle of limited government? How has the writ of habeas corpus evolved in these United States? Under what circumstances, if any, might the writ of habeas corpus place an unreasonable burden on the government? Please begin.
Singer, songwriter, and musician Bob Marley once said, "It is, quote, better to die fighting for freedom than be a prisoner all the days of your life," end quote. As one of the most popular artists in history, Marley was a pioneer for reggae music, while at the time advocated for freedom and liberation. Habeas corpus, which translates from Latin to present the body, is meant to limit the government's ability to detain civilians arbitrarily, therefore being a crucial component of due process. This cornerstone of individual rights is the ancient foundation of liberation that fueled movements such as Bob Marley's. Despite disagreeing with the British monarchy on numerous political concepts, habeas corpus was one of the British ideas that the framers saw the value in adding to their new government. The framers could not have envisioned the use and evolution of power over time. While at times habeas corpus could place a difficult burden on the government, it never places an unreasonable burden on the account of its indispensability.
In protecting the people's individual freedoms, habeas corpus preserves the notion of a limited government in the United States. In Spirit of the Laws, Baron de Montesquieu observed that, quote, all punishment which is not derived from necessity is tyrannical, end quote. In any form of government containing a strong central government, there is an inherent asymmetry between the power of a state and the individual citizen. There have been many attempts to rectify this imbalance, such as the protections provided in Amendments 1 and 4 through 8 in the Bill of Rights. However, they are all inadvertently contingent upon the writ of habeas corpus.
Due to the ambiguous nature of the suspension clause in Article 1, Section 9, granting Congress the ability to suspend habeas corpus when, quote, public safety may require it, end quote, the interpretation of habeas corpus within U.S. courts has evolved since the ratification. Whereas early discussion regarding habeas corpus strove to interpret what is directly stated in the Constitution, such as in the court case Ex parte Merriman following President Lincoln's 1861 suspension, More modern conversation strives to determine the reach of habeas corpus beyond what is directly stated. Throughout the War on Terror, several pieces of legislation, including the Anti-Terrorism Effective Death Penalty Act and the Military Commissions Act, were focused on limiting the extent to which habeas relief could be given through courts in the United States. Although the interpretation and discussion around habeas corpus has changed, its value and necessity have remained the same.
Ulysses S. Grant, through his suspension of habeas corpus in 1871, exemplified how the suspension of such writ can provide ease to settling unrest. However, as Justice Blackstone contended in Federalist 84, quote, confinement of the person by secretly hurrying him to jail, where his sufferings are unknown or forgotten, is a less public, less striking, and therefore more dangerous engine of arbitrary government, end quote. This quote embodies the necessity of habeas corpus's protection. The government was created to be a beast of burden, containing the strength and structure to make it capable to stand the trials of time. A state is therefore obligated to bear the inconvenience of habeas corpus for its sheer necessity to protect individual liberties. So although the absence of habeas corpus can alleviate contention and provide a facade of calmness, the deprivation of the protection of habeas corpus is particularly evil because it is a silent atrocity. Therefore, habeas corpus is a burden the government must bear to secure the liberty of its people.
By Blackstone's observation, quote, there would soon be an end of all of the rights and immunities, end quote, once the people are jailed arbitrarily at the discretion of the government. This shows that any burden habeas corpus places upon the government is outweighed by the necessity of protection. This is why there should be a new constitutional amendment preserving the statute created by habeas case law over time that aims to protect the liberties of the judicial process for all persons, a critical component of securing a limited government. This concludes our statement, and we are ready for your questions.
All right, well, you just laid me a big old fish hook that I'm just going to bite on. All right, so tell me about this new proposed constitutional amendment you guys want to enact.
Clement Etty once stated that the real test of one's belief in the doctrine of habeas corpus is not when one demands its application for one's friends, but of one's enemies. And I think that given the political climate and how there's been a real struggle, I think that Congress should use the Fifth Amendment and ultimately get rid of the suspension clause of habeas corpus.
To add on to my colleague, something the amendment should discuss is the limitations on Congress's ability to create legislature that infringes upon habeas rights without directly outright suspending it, which we saw with the Anti-Terrorism Effective Death Penalty Act, as well as the Military Commissions Act of 2006.
As well as if it's impossible to completely get rid of the suspension clause in Article 1, Section 9, we would propose that there be limitations added in regards to discrimination and being able to just not being able to suspend habeas corpus on the basis of discrimination.
You know, if you're going to propose an amendment, we're going to jump all over that. And here's where my questions are going to go. Why do we need to suspend or worry about the suspension? Because if a suspension does occur, aren't there other protections of the Constitution that protect against improper conduct by the government? And I'd like you to point those out, and why do you think those would not be applicable? Or why the suspension should be taken away?
In Federalist Paper 84, Alexander Hamilton discussed how the establishment of the writ of habeas corpus is a greater security to our liberty than any that the Constitution contains. So while the First Amendment protects our right to free speech, the suspension clause in Article 1, Section 9 limits the government's ability to detain you simply for your opinions.
As to add on, the suspension clause would end up disregarding our Sixth Amendment and 14th Amendment, as our Sixth Amendment is sort of a self-representation amendment, as if we are not able to represent ourselves by our government or with government standards, what is the point in having habeas corpus at all?
As well as you saw, you could see in Lincoln's suspension, when he suspended habeas corpus, it was to jail the press in order to allow the Union to win, which is something that is found in our First Amendment rights. So there is direct evidence that it does violate protections already set up in the Constitution.
So talk to us a little bit about the fact that you seem to think that we need a new constitutional amendment so that habeas corpus can never be suspended. So Lincoln in 1861 is on the verge of the Civil War. He has the border states threatening to secede, as the southern states already have. And in Maryland, he has them raising Confederate troops or secessionist troops that could threaten the very existence of the Union, including the capital, which isn't too far away from Maryland. So my question to you is, are there no circumstances under which it is justifiable to suspend habeas corpus to save the Union, perhaps? Or what do you think?
Well, in Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution, it states that habeas corpus can be suspended in cases of invasion and rebellion. The problem that arises, though, is a person's interpretation of those. Lincoln justified that he suspended habeas corpus because ultimately the Constitution and the Union would have fallen apart if he hadn't. Well, this is a direct violation of Article 6 of the Constitution because it's basically overriding what the Constitution states that you're doing.
I agree with my colleague. Considering that considering that the South had also suspended habeas corpus within their borders, there was no proof that suspending habeas corpus was what allowed us to win. So I would argue that no, it was not justified, because why do something so large if it's not a guaranteed right to preserve the United States?
I think so. If I would have to argue that an amendment wouldn't necessarily say that it can never be suspended, but it'd be important to specify what situations in cases of rebellion or threats to public safety are. Because in instances in history, it has become that has justified times where there's been racial prejudice, such as Japanese internment under Executive Order 9066. Although this wasn't a formal suspension, it still did suspend habeas corpus and intern Japanese Americans. And in Korematsu v. United States court case, this was ruled constitutional.
All right, so let's take a step back. Talk to us about the evolution of the writ of habeas corpus through British and early American history. How did we get to where we are?
One of the most well-known court cases, Ex parte Merriman, regarding habeas corpus in the United States, has paved the way for court cases regarding it now, as it defines that the executive branch did not have the power to suspend habeas corpus on its own. And so therefore, now it is the most common interpretation that only Congress can.
As well as coming from Britain, it was found in the 38th clause of the Magna Carta, but that only applied to barons, and then later was found in the Habeas Corpus Act of 1671.
Explain to me how the implication of the habeas corpus, how the impacts it has on state courts. And, while it's embodied in the federal Constitution, is there an impact, and should that be an impact that the state courts should be forced to bear?
Well, as in different state courts, a specific court case in Florida, there was a time in Gideon v. Wainwright. There was a time where Gideon, he was found guilty for breaking and entering in a Florida state pool. As he filed for habeas relief, as he wasn't given a lawyer, Florida State County, they denied habeas relief. But in other state cases, there have been times where habeas corpus, they have given them relief, as to even though they have gotten lawyers.
All right, we're at time. Okay, good job. Yay. All right, it's time for feedback.
All right, it's always a pleasure to chat with the fine folks from Wauwatosa East. I really enjoyed your opening with Bob Marley. I didn't see that coming, I have to say. But I liked the way you guys tied that in. I thought that was really clever and really interesting. I thought you had a nice conversation in your prepared statement, kind of walking us through this. Some interesting phrases that caught my attention. Talking about it's neverly overly burdensome because the importance of it. Amendments that inadvertently rely on habeas corpus. Just some fascinating tidbits and ideas that you threw out there. I enjoyed our time with our conversation and the follow-ups. You guys really gave us a nice breadth, hitting kind of those key points, ex parte Merriman, Executive Order 9066 and Korematsu, some of the current issues with the war on terror, or relatively current issues with war on terror. You guys really gave us a nice look through the course of American history and even some nice throwback to British history. I really appreciated the conversation today. Thank you.
Okay, if you're going to lead with Bob Marley, which was really cool because nobody was expecting that, you took an outside of the box approach. And I love that it's risky, but you made it work. So it wasn't as if it was just standing alone and then you kind of tried to cram it in. It flowed and it worked, and you tied it into the British idea, and then went into the historical aspect. So I thought that was like, the other thing was, yeah, if you're going to dangle that bait of an amendment, we're going to take that every time. And you guys knew that. Moving forward, I also want to say, in addition to the substance, your appearance and your demeanor and your speech patterns, that's part of communication, not just the ideas, but how you communicate. You guys are doing fantastic. Look like a rock star team. Thank you for picking up on the Gideon versus Wainwright angle, because the federal government says one thing and then the states have to clean up the mess or comply with it. And that requires that all the states have to fund and pay for and provide indigent legal representation, which is another massive expansion on, I think, on the habeas corpus aspect. So that's what I was looking for. You caught it, and you gave me what I was expecting here. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I thought it was a great conversation. I too thought your opening with Bob Marley was just a great, great quote, really. It really set the stage. I loved the idea of a new constitutional amendment. Yesterday we talked about what it would be like to get amendments passed by in today's climate. So this would be quite an interesting amendment to see it wending its way through Congress and then back through the states. But I really thought, and I loved some of your phraseology, that the burden is, one that the government must bear. Just a silent atrocity. Loved it. Great phrase. And you all looked fabulous. You sounded fabulous. It was a great conversation. So thanks very much for being with us. And our congratulations to your teachers for doing such a great job on preparing you for today. Best of luck in the rest of the competition.